My actions honor my vision. My vision reflects my values. My brotherhood shares my mission. Welcome to the Code of Character. What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the Code of Character podcast. My name is Justin Bailey. I am your host and the founder of Code of Character. I want to thank you for spending some time with us checking this out. I know there are many podcasts for you to choose from, and I really want to tell you that it is an honor that you chose to hang out with us for a little bit here. A couple of resources. We have a closed men's Facebook group, over 3,000 men who are in that group that are learning and seeking out character and helping one another grow. If you want to check that out, that's at facebook.com/group/code of character. We also have a weekly blog, and that's some little bit of self-improvement, some psychology, and just really overall just trying to be a better man. That's at codeofcharacter.com/blog. And I get a lot of requests from people asking how they can help and how they can help spread our message and all that good stuff. And the big ways that you can do that right now is by, first of all, subscribing to this podcast, leaving a review to this podcast, and sharing any of these podcasts or any of our content on social media. Really, that is the best way that you can help right now. So thank you so much. I appreciate you tuning in, and we are going to move on to the show. Albert Einstein is credited with saying, "Learn from yesterday, live for today, hope for tomorrow. The important thing is not to stop questioning." There's no doubt that Albert Einstein was an extremely curious person and questioned everything, probably about the world around him. But I think that as men, a lot of times we get very narrowly focused and very closed-minded, especially, as we get up into our ages and start thinking that we probably know a lot more than we do. And specifically around the subject of mental health, I think that we can be very closed-minded in regards to our own mental health and some things that maybe we are struggling with, and maybe some actions that we could be taking that we aren't, to dig into some of our issues and some of our past trauma possibly, or some of our stresses, or whatever that may be. Or maybe it just means going to a checkup and trying to just make sure things are going okay. And I think that we also have a tendency possibly to think that we know more than we do about the subject, and a lot of times that comes out in a way of judgment toward other people when they're working through some of their issues and some of their problems in this mental health spectrum. So I think it's important to never stop questioning, as Albert Einstein told us. And now on to the show. I want to take a quick moment to tell you about The Code. This is our exclusive brotherhood, and this is for guys who are ready to take a step forward and start living a little bit different, start bringing their life into alignment with their values. And it's really wrapped around the three pillars of the code that we have here. Number one is really to establish and define your vision across all areas of your life. Number two is to evaluate your actions, your behaviors, and to see if they fit in line with that vision. If they're not supporting that vision, then just try to start putting in the processes and the safeguards in place to support the values that vision is based on. And number three is to build a brotherhood or a tribe around you to be able to help you down the path, along the journey, to be able to call you out when it's needed, to be able to hold you to some step of accountability. So if this sounds interesting to you, I want to encourage you to stop in our Facebook group at facebook.com/group/code of character and go ahead and join there. You can shoot me a message to find out more about the code, or you can email me at justin@codeofcharacter.com. Hope to see you on the inside. My guest today is Jason McKenzie. Jason is the author of the book, The Dadly Book of Open. He is a leader of men's mastermind groups, and his current project is the Mental Health Warrior community he has built on Facebook, and created a safe area for men who are dealing with mental health issues or supporting family members who are dealing with mental health issues. I asked Jason to come on because he's really tapped into a critical issue here for men that is not spoken about often enough at all. Jason has seen this issue from a couple different perspectives and offers some really unique insight into the topic. So without further ado, my interview with Jason McKenzie. Jason, thanks for joining the show. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. I'm really excited to be here.
So I've been following you on social media now. You've got quite a social media following. I've been following you for about a year, and the first time that I saw you, I believe you were introducing your book. I don't know if it's your only book, but the Dadly Book of Open.
That's right.
And since then, you have, I don't know if transitioned, but you've kind of found a niche with your mental health warriors. So if you want to talk through that piece and how that transitioned over, and then we'll dig kind of deep into the mental health warriors piece.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's been an interesting journey because throughout my life, I had a very structured way of looking at the world, a very traditional way of looking at the world. Go to school, get a job, climb the corporate ladder. And so I never really spent much time thinking about what is it that I'm really, truly interested in. I just knew that, sometimes when I was at work, I felt like there should be something more, but I had no sort of no tools to really start to try to peel back the onion and discover what that was. So I've had a bunch of things happen in my life. And so ultimately last year, I decided I had started talking really openly about my story and all that kind of stuff. And then somebody approached me randomly out of the blue and said, "Hey, I've written 8 books. I love what you're doing. Are you interested in writing a book?" So I thought, yeah, okay, sounds good. So I got a publishing deal, which to all your listeners is not like when you're a first-time author, the publishing deal is basically just someone who edits and prints the book for you, right? It's not like some of those big publishing houses. But regardless, I went through that experience, and it was for me a huge growth experience. Just knuckling down and getting through writing that book. So I launched the book, and then I really started talking a lot about vulnerability, and which was interesting. And as I learned more about myself, and I'm still really interested in vulnerability, I started to just sort of cast around, and there's all these things that were interesting to me. Like obviously fatherhood and helping people create higher levels of customer engagement and all that kind of stuff. And then ultimately what I settled on was that I really feel the biggest passion for is the world of mental health. And that's because of my own personal story. But I think even fundamentally underlying that, what interests me the most of all is human connection and how important it is, and how deep authentic human connections are the antidote to so much of what ails us. So in the mental health warriors community, that's really what I'm trying to do. And it's the same thing you're trying to do in your community, right? It's to create a safe place for people to come together and form connections with one another around the things that really matter. And just to be able to facilitate that and to play a part in it, it's just amazing, man. The stuff that goes on feels so good. So for me, that's what I'm 110% focused on right now. And I feel like it's the right thing for me right now. Who knows? Maybe tomorrow will be something different.
Certainly seems like that you found your niche or your calling there with your podcast and with all the things you have going on. I watched some of your posts and kind of got, I was a follower for a little while, but then the first time that I heard you tell your story, it was on someone else's podcast. I can't remember which one it was. I was kind of blown away. And I think for our listeners to understand, the mental health aspect of what you're trying to do, they're going to have to know your story a little bit. Could you share that with us?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, I was in my early 30s, I guess. So as I was saying before, like my life, man, was totally on track. Like I had a corporate job. I was flying all over the world. I had a beautiful wife, 2 daughters, house with a swimming pool, like all the all the ways in which I measured success at that time seemed to be falling into place. So it was really, what I was doing seemed to be working. And then after the birth of our second daughter, my wife basically completely fell apart. And now I can look back on it with the benefit of time and space and hindsight, and look and see there was lots of warning signs, man, and lots of things that had happened. But I just didn't have a frame of reference to understand them, and I also really wanted things to be perfect, because I felt like the level of perfection in my life was representative of me as a man. So I really wanted to maintain that. I don't think it was an illusion at the time. I just wanted to maintain or pretend that I was the captain of my fate. So at the birth of our second daughter, she, as I said, she fell apart, and I mean it was catastrophic what happened. And she went from being let's put it this way, she was a police officer, and she went from there to ending up in homeless shelters, to becoming addicted to drugs and alcohol, to spending us into near bankruptcy, to moving out, leaving me with our very young daughters. Both of them were just like 2 and less than a year, and for 5 months, and like almost having a stroke at Christmas, and just horrific anger issues and all that stuff. And finally, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Now, I now no longer believe she had bipolar disorder, but be that as it may, that was the diagnosis at the time. And to me, that was, it's funny. I was almost relieved, because this demon, this enemy that we were fighting, had a name, and then therefore it could be treated, it could be vanquished. Just I'll research it and we'll conquer it. And it was nothing like that. So the next 4 to 5 years were a nightmare, and just of hospitalization and suicidal ideations and rage and near bankruptcy, and all this while I'm trying to raise my daughters and keep my wife alive. And at the end, I mean, her emotional issues destroyed her life, and we had separated right near the end of her life. And in March 2010, she took her own life. So she just couldn't. I mean, I don't want to. I've stopped actually trying to imagine what her rationale was. Because it doesn't really matter. I know she was in tremendous pain. I know she had caused tremendous pain, and I knew she felt like just a terrible, terrible burden. And so that's whatever was going on in her head at the time. I'm not sure that I've stopped trying to. I think I did it for myself. Sometimes I would try to project these noble intentions onto her, and it doesn't matter, right? So, and for me, so as a traditional dude, I guess I coped with all of this stress by drinking heavily, because I couldn't acknowledge the fact that I was feeling like what was normal human reactions to extreme stress were, I looked at as weakness, anxiety, breaking down, like literally falling on the ground, bawling, just feeling like I wasn't having control over my emotions, and I needed to be the rock. So I didn't really leave, like I wasn't going to talk to anybody about it, because talking about it, at the end of the day, talking about it wouldn't make her not sick. So why would I do that? I have much more pressing issues. So I painted myself into a corner and started drinking heavily. And so that kind of plagued me for, it was probably 10 years of really heavy drinking, until I finally, just coming up on 3 years now, actually, of being sober. And so, yeah, it's been a wild ride. But, aside from obviously there's some terribly tragic aspects to my story, but man, did it ever result in me becoming a better human being than I was before. And so for that, from that perspective, I'm really grateful. I wouldn't change anything just from that perspective,
Sure. And I can remember listening to the podcast when I heard you tell your story. I was actually doing dishes and listening in at the same time. And your story went on, and I expected there to be this recovery and this happily ever after situation. And then you get to the end of the story and you find out that your wife passed, and I had to run it back and say, oh, what did I just hear? From an outsider, it's such a tragic case, and it's amazing how you have now turned this around to be your life's work. I guess my question is, though, with your two daughters and the situation you were at, I can't imagine how hard that was, and you got into drinking. But I see, it looks like from an outsider and watching your life really play out on Facebook, it looks like you and your daughters are so well adjusted, have a fantastic relationship. How did you even know how to begin walking them through, even through the middle of it, but specifically through the backside of that and coming out of that trauma?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, there's certainly no manual for it, right? So, it started from before their mom's death, when I would try to explain in a way a 5 and a 6-year-old can understand why their mom acted the way she did, and never speaking ill about her, but just trying to find some words to, have them still maintain respect and love for their mom, but to try to, how come she forgets to pick us up from school all the time? Like, stuff like that. And you always have to show up. Well, she's busy at work, and, but then, sitting them down and telling them their mom was dead was just a terrible experience. As you can imagine. So I think, like, for me, I was always a super involved father. So it wasn't like I was, I don't know if it's cliche to say like a high functioning alcoholic or whatever. I don't consider myself an alcoholic at all. I consider myself as someone who's overcome the problems I was drinking to avoid, or I've healed, or however you want to put it. But yeah, so I was always super involved, and they didn't know what I was going through. And one of the reasons is because I didn't know what I was going through. So I took them to all their sports. I drove them to school. I was made breakfast. Like, I was just super involved dad. It's just that my level of emotional self-awareness was capped, right? Because I was too afraid. I know now, and it wasn't a conscious thought, but I was afraid to go through, to grieve and to feel the pain, like of her death and that whole experience. So, but what's happened is, so we were always tight. Now, what's happened is they're a little older now, like they're 12 and 13 years old, going into grade 7 and grade 9. as I've learned about myself, I've been able to share that with them. And, so they know me just as I know me on a more fundamental level, they know me on a more fundamental level. So they understand, for example, that I feel the same fears, like the same emotions that they feel. I think it's really important for a parent to talk to their kids about that, because when your kids know that you feel the same things that they feel, like uncertainty, fear, feeling overwhelmed, anxious sometimes, but joyful and optimistic, and like the full range of human emotions, when they know you feel those, they're going to come to you when they feel them, right? So I've really opened myself up in an age appropriate way. I mean, I don't tell them everything, obviously, but like they know, for example, like when it comes to drinking, I'm never going to tell my kids not to drink ever, because my job as a parent is to teach them the power of their choices. The power their choices have to shape their future. But what I can do is I can open myself up and use my experiences to help them make more informed choices. So like I took my first drink at 13. Why did I do? My God, my daughter's 13 now. I try to imagine that, but so why did I do that? Right? I wanted to fit in. I didn't have a lot of self-confidence. It was more walking my own path was more important. Being accepted was more important than walking my own path. Right. And then I can tell them about why I drank when mommy was sick, and then what that did to me, but what my life is like afterwards. But just being open about, sometimes I felt guilt and shame and uncertainty and all that stuff. They have a ton of information to make the choices that they want. Whatever choices they're going to make, I feel like they're going to make the right ones, because we're also very big on talking about consequences. All our choices have consequences, right? Some you will like and some you won't. But so I think that's how I have kind of turned that around and sort of opened up the book or whatever, and just let them see more of me than I ever probably would have otherwise. And the fundamental reason is because I know myself better than I ever would have if I hadn't gone through this tragedy or whatever you want to call it.
So it turns out transparency can be a good thing in parenthood as well as most of life, sounds like, for you.
Yeah, well, our kids are not dumb, right? So they know they know when we're BSing them. So if they start to feel like either A, you don't understand them, or B, that you're pretending you got it together when you don't, like they can sniff that out. They're like bloodhounds sniffing that stuff out. And when that trust is broken, man, that's when real problems start, right? But when you and your kids can connect around real human emotions, like, Daddy, I'm really scared to do this thing. Oh man, like, you know what? I know how that feels, because, like, I don't know, when I was writing my book, God, here's all the things I was scared about, but here's kind of, just help use your shared experiences to create a connection there. And that when you do that, man, your kids are going to turn out just fine.
Absolutely. So one of the reasons that I wanted you to come on the show as soon as I did, I'm trying to deal with some things here with Code of Character that is not well represented, specifically among men and mainstream, if you will. And mental health, I think, is one of those big ones. And you brought up the fact that your wife saw these, or began experiencing really these issues, or at least outwardly, the results of them well into her life after the second child, birth of the second child, into adulthood. It makes me curious, because I don't have any experience in this situation. And I've messaged you about this last week, I think, is when people are seeking help, and how do you determine, or what are the signs that they're not just kind of in a rut, or maybe going through a tough spot, and or maybe there actually are some mental health problems, some real stuff that, that a buddy just kind of listening to your problems isn't going to help. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And like before I say this, I'm not a psychotherapist, I'm not a counselor, but what I do have is a lot of experience just with mental health personally, and in my family, and talking to a lot of people that deal with mental health issues. And I think part of it is the level of pain, right? Like, so I feel people, one of the problems I think that's happened is, everybody's got some mental illness now, right? We're all depressed, or I feel happy one day and then I feel crappy the next day. Oh, you're bipolar. Like, no, like, come on. But what happened, I think understanding the level of pain is one thing. So what'll happen is, I'll give you an example. So I might talk to a guy and I can feel in his voice that he is just beating himself up about being a failure, like as a mother, as a father, or as a husband, or at work, and all this stuff, and not measuring up, and like all those beliefs they come from somewhere, right? So what I always ask is, to me, it's not even really a question of a mental health issue, because I really believe, especially with all that I've learned this year, interviewing all these people on the podcast, there are very few people that have actual, like what you would consider chemical imbalances, like hardly any. There are some, of course, and sometimes medication is required to get people to a place where they can start to heal. But so much of it is emotionally driven responses to trauma. Right. So when I talk to somebody, I try to establish a rapport with them. And I always ask, hey, man, tell me about your childhood. And almost, if someone is in a tremendous amount of pain right now, there's always an origin story there, man. Like, and so, and my dad, sometimes I was sexually abused as a kid. Sometimes it was physically and verbally abused. Sometimes it was I was abandoned. Sometimes it was I was constantly told I wasn't good enough. It was I was fat and made fun of all the way through high school. Like I was bullied mercilessly. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. If you haven't healed from that, you will never outrun those demons. So what guys do is they beat themselves up about how they're quote, underperforming right now. I'm failing now. I'm blah, blah, blah. I'm not a good husband. I'm not a good father. Okay. But let's look backwards, and are you willing to consider that this thing you experienced or experienced, sometimes it goes on forever, is a thread that runs through your whole life, right? Because if you are willing to consider, I think there might be something there, right? Because when you have trauma, you have to heal from it. Like I look at my wife, for example, my first wife. She was I didn't know any of this. We were together for 16 years and I only found out about this at the end of her life. She was sexually abused. She was physically abused. I mean, I knew she was physically abused. She was abandoned by her mother. Her mother was schizophrenic and all this stuff. And she tried to outrun those demons her whole life. Like she suffered so much hurt, and you can't outrun those demons. So when she goes to a psychiatrist, he says, well, these symptoms are manifesting as bipolar. Here, take some medication. Nobody ever said, hey, like, ask the simple question, what happened to you anyway? Like, tell me about your life. So that's what I always do. And then I have resources I can point them to, right? Where it's like, okay, you know what? You're in a really rough spot. First, maybe you consider this. I have some people that I can connect them with, but that's really is finding out the origin story, because we all have self-doubt, and sometimes we have days where we feel good about ourselves, and some days we have days where we feel not so good about ourselves. But when it gets like really like beating ourselves down, man, and feeling real pain, like that's not normal. Like that, there's a cause of that is very often not something that happened yesterday. You know what I mean?
I had a mentor several years ago who told me, and I hope I can articulate this properly, but he said that the normal question that we ask when people act a certain way is, why do you act that way? But when you dig into their backstory and their life leading up to that, the better question is, why would they not act that way?
That is beautiful. That is absolutely right. And people, that's what, if I can do anything with the podcast, that's the message I want to get across is, our lives are not divided up into like separate and distinct chunks. It's like this continuum, man. Everything that happened to us yesterday impacts what happens to us today. And so we got to be able, sometimes people don't want to go back and look at that because it's so painful, right? But there's lots of, and again, I'm not an expert, but there's lots of sort of therapies or approaches that are gentle and compassionate and kind and sort of accept people and as they kind of come to terms with and heal from those wounds. But you have to do that.
So where do you kind of draw the line at, in today's culture, you've got all the snowflake mentality and people calling this and calling that. And it probably is true. Most people are probably a little too soft nowadays on every end of the spectrum.
Sure.
Where do you draw the line between the one end that's the man up approach and rub some dirt on it, get up and shake it off and move on, versus okay, let's dig into this stuff and let's really get to the core and got some stuff that we really need to work on here. Is there room for both, or what do you lean there?
Oh, absolutely there is. And I think they don't even, sometimes they don't even have to be mutually exclusive. I think like, who are you surrounding yourself with? There's a really good quote, and I'll say the clean version, but it's, before you accept a diagnosis of depression, eliminate the idiots from your life, right? Because so when you look at people's life and you help, like as from say a coaching point of view and say, okay, man, like let's take a look at your environment. Let's take a look at, do you have a sense of purpose? Is there something you're working towards? Is there a dragon you want to slay, an adventure you want to go on, whatever, do you have any of that stuff? Do you understand what your core values are and what's important to you and why? Like, if you don't know any of this stuff and you're just going and you're punching the clock and you're, putting in time, yeah, you're not going to feel good about yourself. You're not going to feel good about your life. So even though there may have been sometimes that's all it is. Like oftentimes, actually, that's all it is. But if that person was to go to the doctor would say, "Oh my God, you sound depressed," and maybe give you some medication. But so there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to, I mean, man up is probably not the way I would put it, but it's like own your life. No one's going to own your life except for you. And you can but if you have had trauma that's happened to you, you still have to own your life. Like there's still no one else that's going to do it for you, right? So it might be more difficult and more challenging. But I talked to a guy in the podcast last week who had been labeled as bipolar, for example, and he went completely the other way. He started eating a probiotic vegan diet. He started meditating. He started like looking into Ayurvedic medicine, like just all these different approaches. And he's not bipolar. He never was. And he knows that now, right? He's off medication.
Wow.
And he's got a long journey because he had trauma to heal from. But so there are an entire infinite range of ways for each and every one of us to create a different life for ourselves. And what I want to do with the Mental Health Warriors is I want to create the greatest collection of information for people to heal and develop themselves, because I think that's, all in one place, because there's so many options and we're just not told what they are. But and I'm sure you see this too in your group, right? About guys who are rudderless, right? And wondering why am I here? What's my purpose? I feel like crap. Like that's a really common thing. And it's not judging people because of it, but man, if you want to feel better about yourself, it feels really damn good to be working towards something big.
Absolutely. And you made a very good point there in the middle of all of that I just want to highlight real quick. And you talked about how even when you have the trauma, even when you have those legitimate things that are holding you back, you still have to make the choices, because you're going to own them one way or the other. You either make the choices to deal with them, move forward, or I guess you let them eat you alive. Or
that's what my first wife did. She made the choice to not confront and heal from what happened to her. And I mean, nobody could have made it for her, right? And look what happened. So, and she was willing to put her faith into the hands of other people, and it had tragic consequences, but I couldn't make her do that. Nobody could have. So, and I'm not for 1 second, underestimating the difficulty of doing that and the pain and the fear. Like I can't even imagine. I had a great childhood, so I haven't really experienced any of this stuff, but I'll tell you, even for me, like facing my grief, that was scary. I mean, that's something that still goes on to this day, and I tried to avoid it, but it was not serving me in the slightest, so I can speak from personal experience that you own you at the end of the day.
And you stopped short of talking about something that I want to dig into. I think you did. And that is, I think you were about to say your wife put her faith in the doctors. It sounded like maybe you're about to say that. And at the risk of offending any medical professionals there, I think it's an important topic. I've heard you speak on this on your podcast. And that is the fact that, diagnosis and medicating these diagnoses may not be a perfect science, and that there needs to be, you need to question the doctors regarding your own life and some of that piece. Did I understand that correctly?
Oh yeah. I mean, so what happens is, I think broader even than doctors specifically, everybody gets wedded to their own modality, right? So this is the thing. It might be like some specific way of doing weight training, or it might be like, I'm a doctor and this is what I was taught in medical school. And we all have it's confirmation bias. Like there's all these aspects of the human psyche where we invest time and money and achieving mastery over a certain modality, and then we kind of become advocates for it. So like I never questioned it. So he said you're bipolar, I was like, okay, like I was saying earlier, that's okay, that's quote great, because now it has a name and it can be treated. But when you start to dig into the efficacy of like antidepressants, like everybody's on antidepressants now, and they are basically hardly more effective than a placebo. It's crazy and this is all publicly available research, right? So my thought is that we have to, and this is what I'm trying to do with Mental Health Warriors. Like, for example, I was talking to an Ayurvedic medicine practitioner who helps clients release the effects of trauma through the breath. Cool. I mean, hey man, it works for somebody. She's got a thriving practice, right? So maybe that would work for me. Maybe it wouldn't. I don't know. But the point is, you need to understand that there is a whole world. And I think part of the problem is in the West, we are taught that, we're the richest countries in the world and our way of doing things is better. And all those people in those backwater countries like India and China, man, they got nothing, even though their civilizations have been around for like 20 times longer than ours have, right? So there's an entire universe of alternative points of view that are valid, but it's like, treat yourself, it's like N of one healing, right? I'm the only one of me. So what works for me and makes me perform at my best is going to be different from everybody else. And so don't be fooled by like certificates or degrees on the wall. Just know yourself, know your mind, know your spirit, know your body, so you can tell what is working for you. Like you innately sense this feels light and right to me. But I think sometimes we just don't have that level of self-awareness. And it's something that I'm working on all the time to try to develop.
It's interesting you brought up the breath there. My wife's a yoga teacher, so I've been hearing about the benefits of proper breath breathing for a little while, and I still don't implement it into my daily life. But I do know that when I do breathe properly and when I take some time to breathe, I feel better. Just in general, I'm able to react to things better. I'm able to process thoughts better. I'm able to relate to other people better when I'm intentional about that. But 99% of the time, I'm not intentional about it, so I don't remember it.
Well, I hear that, and it's something I'm working on too. Like, and I had a moment earlier this summer where I've been going to yoga a lot, and it's amazing how good it has been for me as far as calming me down. Like, I can be you have a pretty racing mind, like not just all kinds of thoughts going on it, but it's calmed me down. And what I realized this summer was I was canoeing with my wife, beautiful, tranquil, sun's coming up. And my mind was everywhere except where we were in that moment. And I had this, like, I don't know if it was an epiphany or whatever you want to call it, but just a realization that if this is what I'm doing right now, and this is a common practice for me where my mind is everywhere but the present moment, this is holding me back. If I continue to be this way, I will never experience all that life has to offer. So I really started kind of digging in and doubling down on meditating, and started really going to yoga quite a bit, because I know for me, the path forward is inward. It's not about how do you build a email list or develop a sales funnel or whatever. Like it's not that. It's how do I find whatever it is I need to find to allow me to fully experience the present moment.
Yeah, I found that a lot with this podcast here, being new to this whole thing. I'm constantly thinking, what's the timer at? Did I hit record on the thing? Is the mic working? Did I make sure it's the right mic was selected? All that stuff. And I have to intentionally stop and look at you and listen to you so I can fully engage and make this the best it could be.
Yeah, I totally agree. I started doing the podcast, the Mental Health Warriors podcast, with somebody else. And that was one of the things. I'm doing it myself now, but one of the main reasons was that I want to be like completely present in this moment. And when I had another person there, I was always thinking about, okay, is he going to jump in now? What question is he going to ask? Is that going to screw up the question I was going to ask? And it was really affecting my ability. I didn't feel like I was honoring the guest, to be honest with you.
Yes.
So I totally hear what you're saying.
Exactly. Now I have a little bit of a beef with you. You have the only free Facebook group that I've not been allowed to join.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. You tried though.
So, and I appreciated that. I said, I'm going to try this out, go in there, and there's a couple questions, but then yours is the first group, I think, besides having questions that you personally responded to me and started asking me some questions, which was cool. Obviously, you're very intentional about who you're letting in the group, even though it is a free, I think I'm speaking correctly. It's a free group, correct?
Yep, it is.
So you're very intentional there. Can you tell us what is this group, the Facebook group, Mental Health Warriors? What does it offer? Who should be joining, and that type of thing?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. So yeah, the group is, the reason we do that is because it's funny. I look at it, I made a video about this the other day, but I kind of think of it like a greenhouse, in the sense that my job is not to share other people's stories on their behalf. My job is to create an environment where people feel safe and comfortable to share their stories in the group, and then gain the confidence to go forth outside the group and start breaking down the stigma around mental health and all that kind of stuff. So our group it's a secret group, and it's founded on 5 guiding principles, which is community, confidentiality, safety, accountability, and excellence. So what we do is, it's all guys, and we just do, break each other's, what's, but based on being guys. But it's also, we do things like we do book clubs and we do community calls with people. We had one on 3 pillars of building an enduring and loving marriage, for example. And we're going to start doing some interviews of the guys in the group, kind of like a mini in-group podcast. And it's just all kinds of stuff, posting links, like all the same stuff that goes on in your group too. But it's just for guys, there's some stuff that gets revealed in there that is like so deeply personal. Like we had about a month ago, one guy decided to reveal just that he had been horrifically abused as a child. And just him having the courage to do that, first time, him having the courage to do that gave 4 other people the courage to come forward. Like, it's a big deal, man. And so I'm really super protective of that environment. So the group is for men dealing with mental health issues or supporting a loved one dealing with mental health issues.
I absolutely appreciate you guarding the integrity of that. That's really cool. I'm going to give you the last word and let us know how we can connect with you and where you hang out and all that good stuff. But before I do, I want to tell our audience here, if you want to follow a fun dude who will teach you stuff, make you laugh, just do some interesting stuff, everything from I've seen kettlebell workouts in the middle of a parking lot to I think yesterday or the day before, he taught us all how to poop in a Facebook post.
That's
so
true.
You're going to get a little bit of everything. So if you want somebody fun to follow on Facebook, go check out Jason McKenzie on Facebook. I appreciate you taking the time here, Jason. Can you just let us know how should we best connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate that. And just so you know, up next is how to make the perfect poached egg, because your wife in the morning, nothing will impress her more than bringing her a perfect poached egg. So
I'll be checking that out.
Yeah, for sure. So so people can get a hold of me at mentalhealthwarriors.com. They can email me at jason@mentalhealthwarriors.com. And I'm on Facebook. You can look for Jason McKenzie on Facebook, and I'll always respond to you. So, I mean, it's not like if you email me with a question or comment or feedback, it's going to disappear into the ether. I will always answer you.
Well, thank you so much, Jason. I think this topic is hugely important. That's why I brought it on the show, and I appreciate your responsiveness with me. You responded right away, and we're more than willing to be on the show. So thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you. It was really a great time being here.
Take care. Thank you for listening to the Code of Character podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and share with your friends on social media. Actions, honor, vision.
Looking to record your very own high-quality podcast? Check out Podcast Center LA. Mention this show and get $10 off your first recording.